Commander Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of her ship Aurora's Edge, watching the stars through the main window. The year was 2387, and humans had been part of the Galactic Council for over 100 years, but they were still treated like the newest and least important species among the 12 founding civilizations. Lisa received a strange signal that morning. It was a distress beacon coming from the void expanse, a region that the Council had declared completely off-limits for the past 300 years. The Council said the area was dangerous and no ships should ever go there. But Lisa could not ignore someone calling for help. Her crew looked nervous when she told them about the signal. Her second-in-command, Nicole Stevens, argued with her about going into forbidden space, but Lisa made her decision. Humans never abandoned people who needed help, even when it meant breaking rules. The Aurora's Edge turned toward the void expanse despite the protests from her officers. The journey took 3 days, and as they entered the forbidden zone, their sensors began picking up something incredible. Hundreds of ships floated dead in space, forming a massive graveyard of vessels. The ships bore markings from species that supposedly died out naturally thousands of years ago, but the blast damage and scorch marks on their hulls told a very different story. Amy Rodriguez, the ship's science officer, ran scan after scan, trying to understand what they were seeing. The dead ships belonged to civilizations that the Council claimed had destroyed themselves in wars or died from natural disasters, but the evidence showed they had been attacked and destroyed by advanced weapons. At the center of this stellar cemetery floated the largest, derelict ship any of them had ever seen. It was enormous, easily 10 times bigger than any Council vessel, and its design was completely unknown. The hull was made from materials that their scanners could not identify and covered in symbols that predated any known galactic writing system. Lisa ordered her team to board the ancient vessel despite the obvious dangers. The airlock still functioned somehow, and they found breathable atmosphere inside. The corridors were vast and empty, designed for beings much larger than humans. Emergency lighting flickered along the walls, casting strange shadows that made everyone nervous. Deep within the ship, they discovered something that changed everything. A massive computer core still hummed with power after thousands of years of drifting in space. When Amy connected her equipment to the ancient system, data began flowing across their screens faster than they could read it. The computer identified itself as the Keeper, and its voice filled their communication devices with words spoken in perfect galactic standard. The Keeper explained that it represented the last survivors of the first galactic civilization, a peaceful alliance that had tried to bring knowledge and harmony to the young galaxy. But the Keeper brought terrible news. The current Galactic Council was not the galaxy's first civilization. They were the survivors of a great war that had destroyed the original peaceful alliance. The 12 founding species had not earned their positions through wisdom or advancement. They had taken control by eliminating everyone who stood in their way. The data logs showed the truth about dozens of species that had supposedly died from natural causes. Each civilization had been systematically hunted down and destroyed when they reached technological advancement. The Council had been committing genocide for thousands of years while claiming to be peaceful explorers and diplomats. Lisa felt sick as she watched the records. Species after species had been eliminated just as they developed space travel or advanced weapons. The pattern was clear. The Council did not seek allies or friends. They identified potential threats and destroyed them before they could become dangerous. Most horrifying discovery came when Amy found records about humanity itself. The Council had been watching human development for centuries, waiting to see if humans would become a threat. The invitation to join the Council had not been an honor. It had been a test to see if humans could be controlled or if they needed to be eliminated. Susan Walker, the ship's security chief, found evidence of recent Council activity in the Forbidden Zone. Ships had been coming here regularly to study the wreckage and remove any evidence that might expose their crimes. The void expanse was not just a graveyard. It was a crime scene that the Council had been trying to hide for millennia. But the Keeper had more to reveal. The ancient ship was not just a repository of knowledge. It was also a beacon that had been sending a signal into deep space for 3,000 years. The signal was not a distress call. It was a rallying cry sent to something that had been waiting in the darkness between galaxies. Keeper explained that when the original alliance was destroyed, the survivors had created a final weapon. A fleet of war machines called the Devourers had been sent into dark space with one mission to return, when called, and finish what the Council had started. The beacon Lisa's crew had detected was not calling for rescue. It was calling the Devourers home. Nicole checked their long-range sensors and found traces of massive ships moving through distant space. The Devourers were already on their way back to the galaxy, drawn by the beacon that had finally been activated by human presence aboard the ancient vessel. The galaxy had perhaps 6 months before they arrived. Lisa faced an impossible choice. She could warn the Council about the approaching threat and save billions of lives, but that would mean protecting the same species who had committed genocide for millennia. She could also stay silent and let the Devourers exact their revenge, but that would mean the deaths of countless innocent people who had nothing to do with the Council's crimes. As she stood in the ancient ship surrounded by evidence of galactic genocide, Lisa Martinez realized that humanity was about to face its greatest test. The decision she made in the next few hours would determine not just the fate of her species, but the future of every living being in the galaxy. The stars outside seemed different now, no longer points of light representing hope and exploration, but witnesses to crimes that had been hidden for thousands of years. The truth was finally revealed, and now someone would have to decide what to do with it. Lisa Martinez knew she could not keep the discovery secret, but when she tried to contact the Galactic Council, she found herself branded as a traitor, and criminal council enforcement ships immediately began hunting for the Aurora's Edge with orders to capture or destroy the human vessel. The official story spread quickly through council space. Humans had violated territorial agreements and stolen classified information from a restricted zone. Lisa and her crew were dangerous rebels who threatened galactic peace and security. But Lisa knew the real reason for the manhunt. The Council would do anything to keep their genocidal history buried. Dr. Amy Rodriguez had returned to her research station on the planet Kepler Prime before the Aurora's Edge entered the void expanse. She began investigating historical records, looking for inconsistencies in the official Council archives. What she found made her blood run cold. Every species that had supposedly died from natural disasters or civil wars had one thing in common. They had all been eliminated just as they reached technological adolescence, the same stage humanity had reached when they were invited to join the Council. The pattern was too clear to ignore. The Council did not seek peaceful cooperation. They identified future threats and eliminated them before they could become dangerous. Amy discovered that the Council had detailed files on every member species, including psychological profiles and threat assessments. Humans were classified as potentially dangerous due to their stubborn refusal to abandon others in need and their tendency to fight against overwhelming odds. These traits made them unpredictable and difficult to control. Meanwhile, Lisa's crew made another horrifying discovery aboard the ancient derelict. The Keeper had been dormant for 3,000 years, but their arrival had awakened something that should have remained asleep. The beacon was not just calling the Devourers. It was also sending detailed information about current galactic civilization, including the locations of every inhabited world. Nicole Stevens ran calculations on their computers, and the results terrified everyone. The Devourers were not just returning for revenge. They had spent thousands of years in dark space growing stronger and building more ships. The fleet heading toward the galaxy was massive enough to sterilize every inhabited world within months. The Keeper revealed more terrible truths about the approaching fleet. The Devourers were not mindless war machines. They were the uploaded consciousnesses of every species the Council had destroyed. Their minds had been preserved in quantum matrices and given mechanical bodies designed for one purpose: total annihilation of their enemies. But the worst news was still to come. The beacon had not been meant to call for help. It had been designed as a final act of vengeance by the dying civilizations. If they could not survive, then nothing would. The Devourers were programmed to eliminate all sapient life in the galaxy, leaving it empty and sterile for eternity. Susan Walker monitored Council communications and discovered their response to the approaching threat. The Council leadership was already making plans to retreat to heavily fortified core worlds. They intended to use the newer species, including humanity, as a defensive line while they escaped to safety. The billions of lives on frontier worlds were considered acceptable losses. Lisa realized the Council's true nature was finally being exposed. They were not leaders or protectors. They were parasites who had survived by feeding on other civilizations. When faced with real danger, they would sacrifice everyone else to save themselves. This was how they had operated for thousands of years. Amy's research revealed that the Council had contingency plans for exactly this situation. They had identified expendable species and marked their worlds for abandonment. The plan was coldly efficient: sacrifice the weak to delay the enemy, while the strong escaped to fight another day. The human colonies would be among the first abandoned, along with dozens of other species the Council considered inferior. Their populations would be left defenseless against the Devourers while Council ships retreated to protected space. Human military commanders were already receiving orders to prepare for evacuation, but only Council citizens would be taken to safety. Nicole discovered that some human officers were planning to follow Council orders. They believed that cooperation with the established authority was humanity's only chance for survival. But Lisa saw the truth. Cooperation meant abandoning millions of innocent people to die while their killers escaped justice. The Keeper offered a different option. The ancient computer core contained technological knowledge that predated the Council by millennia, weapons and defense systems that could level the playing field between the approaching Devourers and galactic civilization. But sharing that knowledge would mean going against everything the Council stood for. Lisa made her decision in the depths of the ancient ship, surrounded by the evidence of genocide and the approaching sound of vengeance. She would not warn the Council about the Devourers, and she would not follow their orders to retreat. Instead, she would do something that defined humanity's character throughout the galaxy. She would fight for those who could not fight for themselves. Aurora's Edge began transmitting on hidden frequencies, contacting every species the Council had marked for abandonment. The message was simple: humanity would share whatever knowledge they had gained and would stand with anyone willing to fight for their homes. The Council's reign of terror was ending, whether they wanted it to or not. Amy started copying every piece of data from the Keeper's archives, information about advanced weapon shield technology and propulsion systems that could revolutionize galactic warfare. The knowledge was dangerous in the wrong hands, but it was the only hope for the species the Council had condemned to. Di Susan prepared the ship's armaments for the battles that were coming. Council enforcement ships were already searching the void expanse, and it would not be long before they found the Aurora's Edge. The crew would have to fight their way out of the Forbidden Zone and somehow stay ahead of both Council forces and the approaching Devourers. As the ancient ship powered down its systems after 3,000 years of waiting, the crew of the Aurora's Edge prepared to change the course of galactic history. They had uncovered the truth about the Council's crimes, and now they would ensure that justice was finally served, even if it cost them everything. The beacon continued its transmission, calling the Devourers home, while simultaneously sending humanity's message of defiance to every corner of the galaxy. The time for hiding and submission was over. The galaxy was about to witness what happened when humans decided to protect the forgotten. Lisa Martinez began reaching out to the species the Council had marked for sacrifice. Her encrypted messages traveled through hidden networks to the insectoid Zephyrians, the aquatic Deep Current Collective, the crystalline resonance hierarchy, and dozens of other civilizations that the Council considered expendable. The responses came slowly at first. Many species were afraid to oppose the Council openly. They had lived under Council authority for generations, and the idea of rebellion seemed impossible. But as Lisa shared the evidence from the Keeper's archives, minds began to change across the galaxy. Captain Nicole Stevens took command of the Human Defense Fleet, but faced immediate problems from her own officers. Many of them believed that sharing advanced technology with alien species was dangerous and violated their oath to protect human interests above all others. The Council had spent decades conditioning everyone to believe that technological superiority must be carefully controlled, but Nicole recognized what the Council truly feared. These species were not inferior or dangerous. They had been deliberately kept weak through technological restrictions and economic manipulation. The Council had created a system where only the founding species had access to advanced weapons and starship designs, ensuring that no one could challenge their authority. Dr. Amy Rodriguez led teams of scientists and engineers in reverse engineering the technologies found in the Keepers' archives. The ancient databases contained blueprints for weapons that could punch through Council shields' propulsion systems that were faster than anything currently in use, and defensive technologies that could protect entire worlds from orbital bombardment. The work was dangerous and difficult. The technologies were thousands of years more advanced than anything the Alliance species currently understood, but desperation drove them forward, knowing that the Devourers were approaching and time was running out for everyone. Susan Walker coordinated security for the growing Alliance as Council agents tried to infiltrate their operations and sabotage their efforts. The Council had declared all Alliance members to be terrorists and traitors, with orders to capture or eliminate them on sight. Council enforcement ships patrolled every major trade route looking for signs of rebellion. The Zephyrians were the first species to openly join the human alliance. Their hive ships were perfectly suited for the swarm tactics that the Keepers' databases recommended against Devourer vessels. The insectoid pilots could coordinate their movements with precision that no individual fighter could match. The Deep Current Collective contributed their bioships vessels grown from living coral that could repair themselves during battle and adapt to enemy weapons. The aquatic species had developed biotechnology far beyond what the Council permitted, giving them unique advantages in ship-to-ship combat. The Resonance Hierarchy brought their crystal vessels that could bend space itself, creating shields that redirected energy rather than absorbing it. Their harmonic weapons could shatter enemy hulls by matching their resonance frequencies, but the Council had banned such weapons as too dangerous for lesser species. Each new species that joined the Alliance brought their own unique technologies and capabilities that the Council had suppressed for centuries. The founding species had hoarded the best technology while forcing everyone else to use inferior equipment, ensuring their continued dominance. Admiral Patricia Hayes had been humanity's representative to the Council for 20 years, but now found herself leading the defense against Council peacekeepers who were trying to stop the Alliance. The irony was bitter. The same ships and crews that claimed to protect galactic peace were now attacking those who wanted to defend their homes. The Council's response was predictable and brutal. They began targeting civilian populations that supported the Alliance, hoping to break morale through terror tactics. Entire colonies went dark as Council ships enforced martial law. Anyone suspected of Alliance sympathies was arrested or simply disappeared. But the terror tactics backfired as more species saw the Council's true nature revealed. Under the mask of civilized authority lay the same brutality that had destroyed hundreds of civilizations over the millennia. The Alliance grew stronger as refugees from Council persecution joined the cause. Amy's research teams made a breakthrough when they successfully reverse-engineered a Keeper defensive system. The shield technology was unlike anything previously known. Instead of absorbing or deflecting energy, it created a quantum barrier that made ships temporarily intangible. Enemy weapons passed harmlessly through protected vessels. The discovery changed everything. Suddenly, Alliance ships could stand against Council vessels despite being outnumbered and outgunned. The technological advantage that had kept the Council in power for millennia was disappearing as their victims gained access to superior technology. Nicole led the first major battle against Council forces at the mining world of Kepler Prime. Her mixed fleet included human destroyers equipped with Keeper weapons, Zephyrian swarm fighters, deep current bioships, and resonance crystal vessels working together in perfect coordination. The Council commander expected an easy victory against inferior vessels crewed by primitive species. Instead, he found himself facing technology that made his advanced warships look like ancient relics. The battle was over in minutes, with minimal Alliance casualties. But victory came with a terrible cost. The Council's retaliation was swift and merciless. They began systematically destroying every world that had supported the Alliance using weapons of mass destruction that violated every treaty they had ever signed. The mask was completely off now, revealing the monsters beneath. Lisa received intelligence that the Council was preparing to retreat to their core worlds, abandoning billions of beings to face the approaching devourers alone. The founding species planned to wait out the genocide from the safety of their fortified systems, then emerged to reclaim whatever was left of the galaxy. The Alliance faced an impossible timeline. The devourers would arrive within weeks, but the Council forces were still too strong to defeat in open battle. The only hope was to somehow turn the approaching fleet away from its mission of total annihilation. But that would require something no one had ever attempted. Amy discovered fragments of the original Alliance, records in the Keeper's deepest archives. The first galactic civilization had not been destroyed by superior weapons. They had been betrayed by those they trusted most. The Council's ancestors had been members of that peaceful alliance. The records revealed the truth about the Devourers. They were not just uploaded consciousnesses of dead species. They were the preserved minds of scientists, teachers, artists, and philosophers who had once believed in peace and cooperation. 3,000 years of isolation and rage had twisted them into instruments of vengeance. But somewhere in those mechanical minds, the original personalities might still exist. If the Alliance could reach those buried memories, they might be able to prevent the total destruction of galactic civilization. The question was whether anyone could survive getting close enough to try, as Alliance ships prepared for the final phase of their rebellion against Council authority. The distant sensors detected the first signs of the Devourer fleet, massive signatures moving through hyperspace toward populated systems. The race against time was about to begin. The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace 6 weeks ahead of schedule, appearing simultaneously in dozens of systems across the galaxy's spiral arms. Their ships were massive beyond comprehension, each vessel larger than entire space stations and bristling with weapons powered by the accumulated technology of 100 extinct civilizations. The Council's response was exactly what Lisa Martinez had predicted. They immediately ordered a full retreat to their core worlds, abandoning their colonies and client species without warning. Council ships that had been defending frontier systems simply vanished, leaving millions of beings defenseless against the approaching horror. But the Alliance was ready. Colonel Susan Walker commanded the defense of Kepler Prime, leading a mixed fleet that would have been impossible to imagine just months before human ships flew alongside Zephyrian swarm fighters, deep current bio-vessels, and resonance crystal ships, all working together with perfect coordination. The first Devourer ship that approached Kepler Prime was a nightmare made manifest. Its hull was black as space itself, and covered in weapons that fired beams of pure destruction. But when it opened fire on the Alliance fleet, something unexpected happened. The shots passed harmlessly through the defending ships as Keeper shield technology made them temporarily intangible. Susan's forces counterattacked, using the ancient weapons from the Keeper's archives, quantum torpedoes that could phase through enemy shields, energy beams that disrupted the molecular bonds holding enemy hulls together, gravity weapons that could crush ships like insects. The Devourer vessel was destroyed in minutes, but victory came at a terrible price. The destruction of even one Devourer ship triggered an immediate response from the entire fleet. Within hours, they began targeting civilian populations across the galaxy, using weapons that could sterilize entire worlds from orbit. Their message was clear. For every Devourer ship destroyed, 1 million innocents would die. Dr. Amy Rodriguez worked desperately in her laboratory, trying to find a way to communicate with the Devourer ships. Her scans had detected something incredible inside their mechanical hulls, fragments of organic neural networks that might contain the preserved consciousnesses of the original species. The breakthrough came when she successfully interfaced with a captured Devourer fighter. The machine contained not just one consciousness, but thousands, all connected in a vast network of shared memory and pain. Each ship was a collective of beings who had watched their civilizations burn and had spent 3,000 years dreaming of revenge. Amy discovered that the individual consciousnesses retained fragments of their original personalities buried beneath layers of rage and programming. Some were driven by pure hatred that had consumed everything they once were, but others still remembered what they had lost: the art and music and love that had once defined their species. Lisa decided to attempt the most dangerous mission in galactic history. She would board a Devourer command ship and try to speak directly with the collective consciousness that controlled the fleet. It was almost certainly suicide, but it might be the only way to prevent the complete genocide of every living being in the galaxy. Nicole provided Lisa with a ship equipped with the most advanced keeper technology available. The vessel could phase through solid matter, making it nearly impossible to stop, but the power requirements meant she would have only minutes inside the Devourer ship before the systems failed. The command ship Lisa chose was enormous even by Devourer standards, a twisted cathedral of metal and rage that dwarfed entire cities. When her ship phased through its hull, she found corridors filled with the screams of the dead and walls that pulsed with organic neural networks connecting millions of preserved minds deep within the ship's core. Lisa found what she was looking for: a massive chamber filled with quantum processing units, each one containing the uploaded consciousness of a being whose civilization had been destroyed by the Council. The chamber hummed with the collective thoughts of species that had been extinct for millennia. When Lisa connected her communication equipment to the network, she was immediately overwhelmed by the sheer volume of pain and rage that flowed through the system. Millions of voices cried out for vengeance against those who had destroyed everything they loved. But beneath the anger, she sensed something else: memories of beauty and hope that refused to die. The collective consciousness spoke to her through the ship's communication systems, but it was not one voice. It was thousands speaking in harmony, creating a sound that was both beautiful and terrifying. They knew who she was and why she had come, but they were not interested in mercy. Lisa tried to show them that the galaxy still contained innocent species who had nothing to do with the Council's crimes. She shared memories from her own experiences meeting the Zephyrians, the Deep Current Collective, and all the other species that the Alliance had brought together in defiance of Council authority. Some voices in the collective began to waver as they saw evidence that not all living species were like their destroyers. They remembered their own original purpose to protect the weak and guide young civilizations toward peace and prosperity. But other voices argued that 3,000 years of isolation had proven that mercy was weakness. The debate within the collective became a civil war as different factions of uploaded consciousnesses fought for control of the Devourer fleet. Some ships continued their mission of total destruction, while others hesitated, uncertain whether their targets deserved death or protection. Admiral Patricia Hayes led the Alliance fleet in a desperate assault on the Council's core worlds. The goal was not conquest but liberation. The Council had hoarded advanced technology and resources for millennia, while forcing client species to fight with primitive weapons. It was time to end their reign of terror forever. The climactic battle occurred when the moderate faction of Devourers allied themselves with humanity against both the extremist Devourers and the remaining Council forces. For the first time in galactic history, the dead fought alongside the living, united by their desire to protect rather than destroy. Susan Walker led ground forces in the assault on the Council's primary fortress world. There they discovered the true scope of the Council's crimes: vast archives containing the cultural heritage of millions of extinct species locked away and forbidden to the galaxy. Their knowledge and achievements had been stolen and hidden. The revelation split the Devourer collective completely as they saw proof that their entire cultures had been preserved by their murderers but kept from the universe like trophies. The moderate faction grew stronger as more consciousnesses chose to remember their original purpose rather than embrace eternal hatred. But the war was far from over. The extremist Devourers and the remaining Council forces had formed an alliance of convenience, both sides willing to destroy the galaxy rather than see their enemies victorious. The final battle would determine whether the future belonged to hope or despair. The final battle took place not in the depths of space, but in the realm of consciousness itself. Lisa Martinez, with help from the Keeper and Alliance scientists, entered the shared digital space where the Devourer collective existed. There she faced the accumulated trauma and rage of 3,000 years of genocide. But Lisa did not come alone. Representatives from every Alliance species joined her in the digital realm, each carrying their own stories of oppression under Council rule. The Zephyrians, shared memories of their colonies being stripped of resources. The Deep Current Collective showed how their young had been taken for council experiments. The resonance hierarchy revealed how their sacred crystal songs had been banned as primitive. Noised together, they created a chorus of voices that showed the devourers something they had forgotten. The galaxy still contained species worth saving, beings who understood suffering and chose compassion over revenge. The moderate faction grew stronger as more consciousnesses remembered what they had originally fought to protect. The revelation fractured the devourer fleet completely as ancient minds chose between eternal hatred and their original purpose of guidance. The oldest consciousnesses, those who remembered the first galactic alliance, began to turn against those consumed by vengeance. A civil war erupted within the fleet as different factions fought over the galaxy's fate. Meanwhile, Admiral Patricia Hayes led the Alliance fleet in the assault on the Council's fortress worlds. The goal was not to destroy the Council species, but to strip them of the power they had abused for millennia and force them to face the families of their victims, Council ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries found themselves outmatched by the ancient technology that their victims now wielded. Colonel Susan Walker led ground forces through the Council's primary archive facility, where they discovered the true magnitude of the crimes committed over the millennia. Entire civilizations had been cataloged and stored, their art, music, literature, and scientific achievements locked away like prizes in a collection. The archives contained not just cultural treasures, but also detailed records of every genocide the Council had committed. Species after species had been eliminated with cold efficiency, their final moments recorded for study. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Dr. Amy Rodriguez worked with teams from dozens of species to begin the massive task of restoration. They found genetic samples that could potentially bring extinct species back to life, cultural databases that contained the complete history of civilizations thought lost forever, scientific discoveries that could revolutionize galactic technology. But the most important discovery was in the deepest vaults where the Council had hidden their greatest secret. The original founders of galactic civilization had not been destroyed. By war, they had been betrayed and murdered by those they trusted most. The Council's ancestors had been their closest allies. The moderate devourer faction arrived at the Council fortress just as the extremist faction launched their final assault. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The dead fighting alongside the living against those who would destroy everything out of spite. Lisa found herself back in the digital realm trying to convince the last holdouts among the devourer extremists to abandon their mission of total annihilation. She showed them images of the new alliance that was forming species, working together, sharing knowledge and protecting each other's young. Some of the extremist consciousnesses began to waver as they saw evidence of the cooperation their own civilizations had once dreamed of achieving. Others remained consumed by hatred, arguing that 3,000 years of suffering could only be answered with equal destruction. The turning point came when the Keeper itself joined the digital conference, revealing that it had been created not for war but as a teacher and guide. Its purpose had been to help young species develop peacefully and avoid the mistakes that led to violence. The ancient AI had watched civilizations rise and fall, always hoping that wisdom would eventually triumph over hatred. The extremist faction found their arguments crumbling as more evidence mounted that the galaxy could be rebuilt better than before. Species that had been enemies for generations were working together. Former victims were choosing mercy over revenge. The dream of universal peace that had died 3,000 years ago was being reborn. One by one, the extremist devourer ships powered down their weapons as their crews chose to remember their original purpose rather than embrace eternal hatred. The civil war within the fleet ended not with victory, but with understanding. Those who still wanted vengeance were allowed to depart, for distant galaxies carrying their rage with them. The Council leadership finally surrendered when they realized that both their own ships and the extremist devourers had abandoned them. Their fortress worlds were surrounded by Alliance fleets, and their crimes had been exposed to the entire galaxy. They could no longer hide behind claims of civilization, and Order Lisa made the decision that would define humanity's legacy in the galaxy. When the Council leaders were finally defeated, she and the Alliance chose not to execute them but to strip them of power and force them to work alongside the species they had oppressed. The goal was not revenge, but justice. The new galactic covenant was established on principles that seemed revolutionary. To the old galaxy, technological advancement would be shared freely. Weaker species would be protected and guided rather than exploited. No civilization would have the right to determine another's fate. Amy became the head of the new Xenoarchaeological Institute, working to restore the lost cultures and knowledge the Council had suppressed. The galaxy's children would finally learn about their heritage and the civilizations that had come before them. The Keeper became the Alliance's guide, helping species develop new technologies safely and ethically. The ancient AI finally had the chance to fulfill its original purpose of teaching and nurturing young civilizations. Susan led the new Galactic Defense Force, created not to enforce the will of the powerful but to protect developing species from those who would exploit them. The strongest would serve the weakest. Rather than ruling over them, Lisa took the title of Guardian, leading exploration missions to find and protect developing civilizations in distant sectors. The humans had learned the most important lesson of all: true strength came not from standing above others but from lifting them up. The moderate devourers chose to remain in the galaxy, working alongside the living, to build something better than what had been destroyed. They shared their accumulated knowledge and experience, helping to prevent the mistakes that had led to such tragedy. The galaxy that emerged from the ashes of the old order was not perfect, but it was hopeful. Species that had been enemies became friends. Civilizations that had been forgotten were remembered and honored. The dream of universal peace that had died with the first alliance lived again. Years later, when children of dozens of species learned about the Great War, they would understand that the galaxy had been saved not by superior weapons or brilliant tactics, but by the simple choice to protect those who could not protect themselves. The humans had shown the galaxy what it could become when its greatest power was not fear but hope. The stars that had once witnessed genocide and betrayal now shone down on worlds where former enemies worked together in peace. The galaxy had turned away from its forgotten children, but humanity had risen to protect them. And in doing so, they had not just saved other species, but had shown the universe what it truly meant to be civilized. The end had become a beginning,